Good evening from New York. As oil and gas continue churning into the Gulf, more than 4 million barrels now. Democrats today brought a measure to the Senate floor that would increase the amount Americans hurt by the spill can get from those responsible. But in our fifth story tonight, a lone figure dared to stand up in defense of the oil companies. The law, spearheaded by Bob Menendez of New Jersey, a state with miles of beaches, would have raised the current limit for liability from $75 million, a drop in the oily bucket, to $10 billion, still less than BP makes in profits over half a year's time. The procedure was one used for non-controversial, bipartisan votes, unanimous consent, which means there's no vote and the bill just passes unless someone objects. Cue the Republican.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, campaign recipient of more than $400,000 from the oil and gas industry, explained that increasing liability will make drilling prohibitively expensive for mom and pop operations, and said existing law already permits those hurt by the spills to seek compensation in court.
The law expressly allows for unlimited damages. So you've got unlimited damages in state courts where the compensatory, the punitive damages are already being sought. As we speak, there have been numerous claims filed. Back on the 28th of April, the Louisiana Shrimpers filed a class action lawsuit against BP, Transocean, Halliburton, and Cameron for their economic losses.
Senator Menendez argued that if mom and pop drillers lack the resources to cover the damage they do, maybe they ought not risk doing the damage in the first place. He also offered Senator Murkowski a history lesson about her own state and oil.
The suggestion that those who are harmed, the fishermen, the commercial fishermen, the tourism companies, and others, ultimately will be in a position to make claims in state court. Well, I know my distinguished colleague from Alaska knows what happened in the Exxon Valdez case. That took 20 years for claimants to try to get their just response. And some of them fell off the way because they just couldn't keep hanging in there. And they lost everything.
We learned yesterday about the faulty blowout preventer, which could not be activated because of A, a dead battery, B, the loose fitting that leaked hydraulic fluid, and C, modifications that disabled a key part of it and were not reflected on the schematics, which caused a whole day of wasted effort to shut down the spill. Regulators testified at a Louisiana hearing yesterday that the blowout preventer was designed, manufactured, and installed without any government oversight at all. The Wall Street Journal today reporting that after bad test results of the new cement seal on the well, BP decided to move ahead anyway. The alternative, at least a week's delay in fixing the seal at a cost of more than $5 million. Transocean, owner and operator of the rig, today petitioning a judge, arguing that its own liability should be less than $27 million based on 19th century maritime law. Joining us now, Ezra Klein, policy writer for The Washington Post, columnist for Newsweek, and the author of the Wonk Book newsletter. Ezra, good evening.
How are you?
Given that Transocean is hard at work trying to game the court system against Americans who were hurt by this spill, do you have an idea of why Senator Menendez says the courts are not sufficient for providing remedy for these spills and what the proposed remedy in his bill is?
Well, Keith, I'm no expert on 19th century maritime law, so that might disqualify me here. But as Senator Menendez says, when you go through the courts, it takes a very, very long time in these cases. And a lot of the people, it's a dispersed damage. It's a lot of individual fishermen, individual restaurant owners, and it's hard for them to stick in that. It's hard for them to keep up with the legal fees. It's hard for them to get away from some hotshot lawyer bringing up 19th century maritime law. Mm-hmm. On the other side, we have a law that makes for an expedited process but has a $75 million cap. Now, we've had estimates of the BP damage at up to $14 billion. So he's trying to move it up to $10 billion. So there could be an expedited process for these people who lost everything now to get it back soon.
We did put in a call to 19th century maritime law expert Herman Melville, but we haven't heard from him back, so let me go on with you.
Yeah, he's not good about responding to calls these days.
He also knows about the customs house down here. Senator Murkowski's other objection, she's protecting mom and pop operators who wouldn't be able to afford insurance. Can you flesh out or add to that rebuttal that Senator Menendez gave? And are there a lot of mom and pop oil drilling offshore operations?
I don't know how many mom and pop offshore operations there are. I mean, these mom and pop operations, I imagine, are a lot lot bigger than, for instance, what my mother and my father own. I don't think that's a scale we're talking about. But it is totally conceivable that there are a lot of oil drilling operations that if the true cost of oil were put into the price of what they have to do and what they have to cover if their drilling goes wrong, they couldn't afford to do it. And that gets to a much more important and much larger point. What we pay at the pump does not include all the costs that oil exacts on society. There's an enormous amount of pollution, danger from global warming, spills like this one. The National Academy of Sciences put in just some of those and estimated that oil should be at least 29 cents more per gallon. So yes, it is true that if you made oil reflect its true cost, either some of us wouldn't buy as much of it, or some people who currently produce it wouldn't be able to produce it. I'm just not sure why it should be the government's role to encourage mom and pop production of oil or more production of oil.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this last point. BP literally already has a criminal record for the deadly blast at Texas City, Texas, for the spills in Alaska, at Senator Murkowski's Alaska, for conspiring to corner propane and manipulate the price, and we assume that was upwards. So why are we talking about any cap on liability? I assume we don't do that for organized crime usually. And B, why are Republicans engaged in defending habitual criminals from having to compensate their victims?
Well, on A, it's because the cap is a sort of expedited process, and I imagine, I'm not an expert on it, but I imagine it has a lot to do with, there are probably some legal issues there, I'd guess. On the other hand, I don't know exactly what the Republicans are doing on this. Remember, the Senate is sort of run like a hippie commune. If as many as one of them says, no, I don't want to continue, everybody's got to stop for a couple days and sort of have a feeling circle on it before they take a vote of 60. So what the Republicans will eventually do on this, I think, is up in the air. Senator Murkowski, I imagine you're seeing that there are a lot of Alaskan oil companies that don't like this legislation and worry that in the future they will have a massive oil drilling catastrophe, and they don't want to be on the hook for it, and she's helping them out.
Senator Murkowski from the hippie commune, Ezra Klein of the Washington Post and Newsweek reporting to us tonight from Woodstock. Thank you, Ezra.
Thank you.